Hello and welcome to Flip Video 25. Today we're going to talk about the causes of the Great Depression. This is a shorter video, which will be nice for you, but it will be accompanied by a graphic organizer that you're going to fill out. All right, you're going to look for the 10 causes of the Great Depression. First, we have what happened to farmers. Okay, so the Great Depression is a huge event that affected the entire country, and as we talked about later on, the world. Okay, so that contributed to it. One of the causes was, so during World War I, farmers increased their crop to keep up with the demands and invested in large farm equipment on credit. Okay, so during the war, they started to give them extra money, right? And so they made more. Well, after the war, the demand for crops dropped, but farmers didn't adjust how much they were planting, right? So it's called their yield. All right, so here are the farmers. They've got this expensive new equipment that they have to make payments for, and they've got all of this crop, but no one's buying their crop. They don't need as much of it in the market. So farmers are falling into debt that they can't pay off. Then we have too much credit. Okay, so Americans are buying homes and cars and appliances on credit, right? And it's very similar to what's going on today, right? But there wasn't anything like the credit bureaus back then, all right? So they don't check your credit score to find out if you can afford to have credit. They just give you it, all right? So Americans are also buying stock on credit by buying on the margin, and too much of the economy is relying on credit. So things like 80% of the radios and 60% of the cars rely on credit to buy them. So they're producing a lot of them and they're selling a lot of them on credit, which means that they aren't all owned yet, all right? So only a partial amount of them are actually paid for. Then we have Black Tuesday, okay? So too many stocks were bought on a margin, and in speculation, this made those stocks have no real value. Okay, so we talked about this. So a lot of people are making payments on stocks and the stock prices are going up, right? So yeah, they're kind of getting a deal on it, but they haven't really paid for these stocks. Okay, so as the stocks get worth more and more, they're actually not worth more. I know that sounds really strange, but because the stocks haven't been paid for yet, there's actually no value to them. So this is causing some problems, right? So in September, the stock market began to fall. And on October 29th, the stock market crashed. I don't know why it says 24, but it's the 29th, 1929. Okay, so to give you an idea of how big it dropped, GE went from $400 a stock to $283. Okay, so that's almost a third. And investors began to panic, right? So like, oh my gosh, it's starting to crash. We need to get our money out while we can, right? And so they sold their stock. 16 million stocks were sold in a day. Okay, so this again makes that stock, the price go down, right? But there's also a lot of this stock that they're selling, they haven't paid everything for yet. So it causes some serious holes in the stock market. So banks and businesses. When the stock market fell, Americans panicked and wanted to pull their money out of the bank. All right, so banks, unfortunately, did not have enough money on hand to sustain a run on the bank. So in 2 years, 3,691 banks ended up failing. So what this means is Americans are going to the bank. Well, the banks don't actually just hold your money in some big vault when you put it in there, right? They invest that money as well in stocks so that they can earn interest. They can earn money on it, all right? So the banks, the money's not worth what it was, and the banks don't have that money set aside for their customers. So here all of these customers are coming in saying, I need to get my money out of the bank, and there's no money to be had. And so these banks, they can't just make it appear out of thin air. If the stock market is crashing, the banks can't sell their stocks either and so they're failing, and people are losing a lot of money. Okay, so that's what's happening with the banks. Now let's talk about the businesses. Consumers were not buying. Okay, so if they don't have any money, they're not going to go shopping, right? So businesses responded by closing plants and laying off workers. Ford ended up laying off 75,000 workers. And by 1933, 25% of all American workers lost their jobs. Okay, this is very similar to what we saw when COVID hit. There was a lot of businesses that ended up having to close, that ended up having to lay off workers, which is why the government came up with the unemployment, added to the unemployment, because so many people were out of work. And the government wanted to keep people still buying so that the economy can still keep working. Those kind of things did not exist at this time. Okay, so there was no government cushion to help people pay their bills, okay, or be able to buy food or products. So businesses are starting to fail. Banks are failing and businesses are failing. And then tariffs and European economies. So to protect American products from competition, President Hoover raised the tariffs. Okay, so what that means is to bring a product into the country, you have to pay a fee. All right, so say there's British cookies, all right, and we're going to sell those British cookies in America. But to sell those British cookies in America, the British company has to pay a fee to America to sell their cookies in America, okay? So what does that happen to the cost of the cookies when they get to the shelves? They go up to make up for that tariff. So what America does is, look, we want to make sure that Americans are buying American-made products so our companies can stay open, all right? So we're going to make it harder for these countries overseas to send their product here to sell because we want people buying American product. So we're going to raise the tariff. So Hawley-Smoot tariff raised those tariffs so high that European products just could not compete with American products. They just were way too expensive. All right, so that same European biscuit we were talking about from Great Britain, it's going to cost $10, where the American one only costs $5. Okay, so what does Europe do? They respond and raise their tariffs. All right, so America had become a world player on the economy, right? On the world economic stage. You know, we are selling our goods internationally, okay? So we're making a lot of these goods, okay? So Europe is like, well, if you're gonna raise your tariffs, we're gonna raise our tariffs. We're gonna make it just as hard because obviously we can't sell our products into the markets that we could count on before. So now Europe's like, fine, we'll do this. Well, now Americans can't sell their products at home or abroad. Nobody in America can afford to buy products because nobody has work. Nobody in Europe can afford to buy American products because the tariffs are so high. Okay, so America's depression creates a domino effect. Okay, so America could not loan money to Germany. Germany could not make reparation payments to Britain and France, and Britain and France could not pay their loans to America. Okay, so it's kind of a circular thing. So after the war, the Treaty of Versailles said, hey, Germany needs to make reparation payments to Britain and France. They did a lot of damage. They killed a lot of people. They have to pay back for what they did. And Germany's like, well, we don't have a whole lot of money. So Germany, first off, Germany prints a whole bunch of money to try to pay it off. But the problem is when you print a whole bunch of money, it lowers the value of your money because there's no gold to back it. It's just a bunch of paper, right? So what happens is Germany's money isn't worth much. So what they do is they borrow money from the U.S. Okay, the U.S. has money and it's worth a lot more. Okay, so they borrow the money from the U.S. and they take that money so that they can pay Britain and France. Okay, well, Britain and France had also borrowed money from the U.S. Okay, so they had to pay the U.S. back because Britain and France, to fight the war, they borrowed money. So what does Britain and France do? They take that money that they get from reparations and they pay America, right? So we've got this circle going on. Well, if America doesn't have any more money because of the Great Depression, because we've got the stock markets falling and the banks crashing, right? There's no money in America, then America can't make the loans to Germany. Okay? Well, if Germany can't make the loan, can't get their loans from America, they can't make their payments to Britain and France. Britain and France can't make their payments to America. And then all the dominoes fall. And so we're starting to see a worldwide depression now. All right. So I hope this helped. I hope you can point out all 10, and I look forward to seeing you in class on Tuesday.